Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm talking with Wes Smith, author, senior fellow at the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism. And it's unfortunate that we continue to have these conversations of affront against human exceptionalism and human flourishing. This is no different. This has to do with Wes's new piece, Dementia Patients and Death by Intentional Undernourishment. Wes, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Marcus, always good to join you. Thank you.
It's not as if any affront to human exceptionalism is not bad enough, but then you take a look at this scenario and you realize we're willing to be malicious about it in terms of undernourishment. So tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, there's a push in euthanasia advocacy to be able to basically kill people with dementia when they become incapacitated. One thrust is for them to sign, people to sign an advance directive saying, when I reach a certain point, give me the lethal jab or give me assisted suicide. That is done in some countries. It is not legal any place in the United States. Another is for people to, they call it VSED, voluntary stop eating and drinking. It's suicide by self-starvation and dehydration. And then you stop eating and drinking, and then doctors come in and provide palliation so you can finish yourself off through malnourishment. Now, a third one is popping its head up, and it was just reported, a big story in the New York Times, and this is known as minimal comfort feeding. I mean, they always have these little names, right?
Yeah, all euphemistic.
Yeah, but the idea is in minimal comfort feeding is you intentionally give people less than they need to sustain their lives. And you only give so much as it might be required to perhaps assuage thirst or food. But you even, I quote in this piece, a bioethics article that kind of stirred the New York Times piece. Before they do that, they want to give people medication so they won't feel hungry. What are we talking about? Sedating people? So the idea here is find ways to make sure that dementia patients, after they're incapacitated, die quicker, die sooner, and basically get out of the way. Now, a lot of people confuse these issues with things that are different, and we have to be real clear. When you oppose minimal comfort feeding, you're not saying people should be force-fed. So sometimes when people are dying a natural death, in fact, this happened with people in my family, they just lose all interest in food. And, that's because the body is shutting down. That is a normal function, and you don't force food on people. We're not talking feeding tubes. Now, people can have a discussion about whether feeding tubes should or should not be provided, but feeding tubes are deemed a medical treatment. And the problem with this minimal comfort feeding and VSED is that they're turning normal humane care, what every human being deserves, providing proper nourishment, into akin to a medical treatment. It's like saying, well, we have a humane obligation to keep you warm, but you said you wanted to die by hypothermia. So when the blizzard comes, we'll open the window, sit you in front of it without a blanket. I mean, of course, you're never going to do that. I don't see the difference. And we're also not talking about forcing people to be hooked up to machines and this kind of thing, because I noticed in the New York Times piece, a lot of people who responded to the article, which I'm quoted in, by the way, which was very kind of the reporter, they completely conflate different things. So people are very confused about what we're talking about on these various issues. And, the idea of being able to discriminate in the sense of determine what we're talking about here versus a different thing is important if you're going to have informed ethical discourse.
And the issue here is, like you mentioned, informed ethical discourse. The issue here is there's not even a consistent line of ethics when it comes to thinking about the human person. And so even when you read the description of minimal comfort feeding, it sounds humane until you scratch below the surface.
Yeah, well, that's the idea. That's why they come up with these names. It's like medical assistance in dying maid. Oh, he's going to have maid. They're trying to avoid what's really going on, and that's taking action to directly make someone dead.
And so the goal here in all of this, even with minimal comfort feeding, or in the interest of just undernourishment, intentional undernourishment, the purpose here is to bring about death as quickly as possible, to hasten death, because the person has become a drain on resources.
Yeah, or the emotional turmoil that can come from this. I have very up close and personal experience with this because my mother died of dementia, Alzheimer's, and my wife and I brought her into our home. For the last 6 months of her life, she was in the hospice situation, got tremendous care from the hospice. But at one point, she wasn't eating, and I was offering her food and so forth. I wasn't going to force feed her. She had told me she certainly didn't want a feeding tube. So I had a visiting angel who had been with my mother for years. And the visiting angel came over, and she brought a can of canned peaches. Opened it, my mother went nuts, scarfed them down. Loved the canned peaches. And so suddenly we found something my mother really wanted. And so we gave her canned peaches, we gave her cottage cheese. That led to her eating cereal and different kinds of things. So, the idea that I would have kept those canned peaches from her when she had lost interest in things like meat or other kinds of food would have been horrible to think about. And my mother, eventually passed away peacefully after going into a coma. But my goodness gracious, I know what this is. And you can really keep people in that very vulnerable circumstance from getting the proper care they should have.
What that situation also proves is we don't know everything about people who are facing eventual death. And so
Yeah.
we owe it to the dignity of the human person to, at the lowest level, try to respond with as much rightful charity and compassion as possible.
Yeah. And think about if you decided, let's say you had a sick dog and you said, well, I'm going to slowly malnourish my dog to death. You'd be turned into the authorities. And by the way, all of this, then people would say, well, sure, of course, in that circumstance, you put the dog down with a lethal jab. Why don't we also do that to people? That's what this is intended to get us to accept.
Which again goes back to what you and I have been talking about in terms of the watering down of human exceptionalism. So let's then talk about what our listeners can do to not only respond to this, but to protect themselves and their loved ones against it.
Well, I think if you're having hospice in home, obviously I interviewed the hospice facility because some hospices don't value human life as much as others, and I found the right kind, the right one. If your loved one is in a facility, make sure you have that discussion with people and make sure you visit, because the more people visit, the more people who work at these places and are often under great pressure will understand that people are paying attention. So it's very, very important that people do that. People should write advance directives in terms of, do you want antibiotics and this kind of thing? That should never be forced on people, so people can write advance directives. I just think there has to be a complete separation between medical treatment, such as antibiotics, kidney dialysis, and humane care, keeping warm, keeping clean, making sure you get the nourishment you want. And if we are going to start creating killable castes, CASTE, of people, then you've completely undermined human equality. You're going to say that some people are killable and others aren't. And then at that point, the killable people can become instrumentalized and used for other purposes, as we've seen with organ harvesting and euthanasia.
Thank you so much, Wes, for always drawing our attention to this. As a final note, too, I wonder if you have a word to all of our listeners to watch out for situations like this and to seek the proper kind of help.
Yeah, if your loved one is being cared for, make sure, check to make sure they don't have bed sores, things like that. Make sure that you go in there and bring a milkshake. You know what I'm saying? Make sure that you're seeing the kind of responsiveness or the kind of care that they might want, and talk to the caregivers. Say, hey, how's mom doing? I noticed today she didn't wake up very well. Is this something we're seeing quite a bit of? And so forth. And if you end up with a difficulty or something that you think is really wrong, contact the ombudsman, because there should be an ombudsman available to make sure that people get proper care. And the other thing that's very interesting, in fact, there was a response to I think my piece in Nash Review. Somebody wrote who is a professional in this field, and he said, what makes people think that somebody in a facility, that the people are going to be able to keep coming by a bed to see if they have signs of hunger? That's not going to happen. And so this whole way, to me, is a way of excusing neglect.
Well, Wes, thank you so much for your time. My guest has been Wes Smith. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.